Hi, welcome to Street Priest Ministries. I'm your host, Brother Jay, as we're taking the Gospels back to the streets. Today's drive-through message is Esther versus Haman. So turn in your Bibles to Esther chapter 5. Now, this book is very important to the Jews of the day. As many times in history, they were facing annihilation. And God always, throughout history, dealing with the Jews, has someone in place that usually saves them. This is the case here. And we're going to study about Esther. Queen Esther. Now, Esther's name means star. That's what her very name means. And she definitely was that to the Jews. She was definitely a shining light, a bright star in their history. She saved them from annihilation at great risk to herself, what we're going to read about. Now, to give you the backdrop before we delve into chapter 5. The Jews were taken into bondage under Nebuchadnezzar around 536 BC, somewhere around there. And they had been in bondage for 70 years. God said he was going to raise up Cyrus the Great, to bring them back. And Cyrus was to give an edict for them to return and build their temple. And that's what a lot of the minor books are about. The book of Nehemiah and the book of Hezekiah and Haggai specifically. And some of the other minor prophets. It was about them going to restore to restoration of the temple. Only a remnant went back. The majority of them was comfortable in the Shushan Empire and the other provinces of the Medo-Persian Empire. They didn't want to go. There was only a handful that went. As I recall, I think it was roughly 600,000 people. Only 600,000 returned. And this is where we picked up. So I gave you a little backdrop. Ashurus is the king, and he reigned from Ethiopia, from India to Ethiopia, the Medo-Persian Empire. And it was 127 provinces, so it was a huge kingdom, and he was very rich. He was noted as one of the richest of the, one of the wealthiest of the Medo-Persian kings. So he threw a feast that lasted 180 days, showing off all his riches from all the kingdom. And he had a wife named Vashti. And as he was partying and drinking during this 5-month span, he required his wife, he sent an edict for his wife, the chamberlains, to bring his wife to him, Vashti. Vashti refused. She said, "No, I ain't coming to you, king. I'm busy." So, king was furious. So he had a council with his wise men. The wise men said, "Well, if you don't get rid of this queen, it's going to start a feminist movement throughout the kingdom, and none of the wives are going to listen to their men anymore. So you're going to have to put her away. You're going to have to divorce her. Kill her. Not kill her, but put her away. Not kill her, put her away, but divorce her. Or else you're going to have a female uprising here. You're going to have a Susan B. Anthony-led revolt in the men's homes if you don't do something about this king to the queen." So he did. He publicly divorced her, got a new harem, and went to all the provinces throughout from Ethiopia to India, and they brought women from everywhere. And Esther was one of those women that was brought to him. She was of Jewish descent, and that's where the story picks up here. And she's part of that harem. Now, Esther was very, very, very gorgeous woman. God made sure that she was to get the king's attention. She's the kind of woman that kings would go to war over just because of her beauty. So he was smitten by her beauty right away. All right, so we're going to pick up at chapter 5. Now it came to pass on the third day that Esther put on her royal apparel and stood in the inner court of the king's house over against the king's house. And the king sat up on his royal throne in the royal house over against the gate of the house. And it was so, when the king saw Esther, the queen, standing in the court, that she obtained favor in his sight. And the king held out to Esther the golden scepter that was in his hand. So Esther drew near and touched the top of the scepter. Then said the king unto her, What wilt thou, Queen Esther, and what is thy request? It shall be given unto thee, even half of the kingdom. And Esther answered, If it seem good unto the king, let the king and Haman come this day unto the banquet that I have prepared for him. Then the king said, Cause Haman to make haste, that he may do as Esther has said. So Haman is the guy that the king had made prominent in the kingdom, like third, and I guess he was like a vicer in the kingdom. And he hated the Jews. So he had, because of Mordecai, her uncle, Esther has an uncle named Mordecai, he refused to bow, because in their religion they don't bow to men. Thou shalt not bow to, according to the Torah, to any man, idol, or anything. You only to bow to God, only Yahweh, Jehovah. So he was adhering to the law. Mordecai was a just man, a good man. Esther's parents had died, and he had raised Esther as his own. So he refused to bow. This pissed Haman off. Haman was pissed. And he had been, even though the king had exalted him into the kingdom and gave him a prominent position, that's still, when there's this one man not bowing, just ruined every time he saw him, because Mordecai sat at the gate. So it infuriated him. So he talked the king into passing the edict to kill all the Jews in the kingdom, because Mordecai was a Jew. He didn't know Esther, the queen, was a Jew. That's what he didn't know. Show you how God, when it comes to cabals and wicked men in high places, how God always has his people in place, even when it seems like hope is all lost, to checkmate. That's what we witness in here, as far as power is concerned. So Esther's setting him up now. She's setting Haman up. And the king said, Cause Haman to make haste, that he may do as Esther has said. So the king and Haman came to the banquet that Esther had prepared. And the king said unto Esther at the banquet of wine, What is thy petition? And it shall be granted unto thee. What is it thy request? Even to the half of the kingdom it shall be performed. Then answered Esther and said, My petition and my request is, if I have found favor in the sight of the king, and if it please the king to grant my petition and perform my request, let the king and Haman come to the banquet, that I shall prepare them, and I will do tomorrow as the king has said. Then went Haman forth the day joyful, with a glad heart. He said, Oh, I ain't our special. I just got promoted by the king, and now here come Esther, going to throw a special feast with just me, her, and the king. Aren't our special? He's happy, skipping all the way home to tell his wife. Then went Haman forth that day joyful and with a glad heart. But when Haman saw Mordecai in the king's gate, that he stood not up nor moved for him, he was full of indignation against Mordecai. Just Mordecai ruined everything for him every time he saw him, no matter what mood he was in. Nevertheless, Haman refrained himself, and when he came home, he sent and called for his friends and Zeresh his wife. And Haman told them of the glory of his riches and the multitude of his children, and all the things where the king had promoted him, and how he would advance him above the princes and servants of the king. Haman said, moreover, yea, Esther the queen did let no man come in with the king unto the banquet that she had prepared, but me myself, and tomorrow I am invited unto her also with the king. Yet all this availeth me nothing, so long as I see Mordecai the Jew sitting at the king's gate. So this one man is dampering everything. I can't even celebrate without having indignation for this Mordecai the Jew to refuse to give me homage. Then said Zeresh his wife and all his friends unto him, let a gallows be made of 50 cubits high. That's about 70 feet. He said, build some gallows. Gallows is to hang somebody on. I mean, you can hang a man with 7 feet, but show you how bureaucracy always overkills. It's like shooting a guy with a aircraft, anti-aircraft gun. Yet all this availeth me nothing, so long as I see more of her. Then they said, build a scaffold for him. We're going to hang this guy 70 feet up. Mordecai may be hanged thereon. Then go down merrily with the king unto the banquet. And this thing pleased Haman, and he caused the gallows to be made. On that night could not the king sleep. Now this is the only book in the Bible where the Lord God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, God of the Jews, isn't mentioned at all. There's no mention of God in this book at all. But yet you can see God quietly working behind the scenes, setting up Haman. And it was found written that Mordecai God took away the king's sleep and put on the king's mind to search out his records. And in his records, Mordecai, which is Esther's uncle, sat at the gate as two of his chamberlain, two men in his inner circles. Always those right and left hand men in the inner circle is conspiring against you. In their case, they conspired to kill the king. It was a coup attempt. They wanted to kill the king and overthrow the king. And God had his man in place to hear this cabal that was taking place. And he went and reported to the king, and them two men were hung. So God put on his king's heart to remember what Mordecai had did. Now Mordecai is a Jew. Keep that in mind. And the king had already given the edict to Haman to kill all the Jews and all throughout the 127 provinces. Show you how God works. It's like a chess player. And the king said, and it was found written that Mordecai had told of Bigama and Teresh, two of the king's chamberlains, the keepers of the door, who sought to lay hand on the king, assurance. Always somebody want to take you out when you're king. It's good to be king, but then again, sometimes it's not to be a good king. Everybody's conspiring to take your throne away from you. And the king said, what honor and dignity have been done to Mordecai for this? Then said the king's servants that ministered unto him, there is nothing done for him. He said, the man didn't get no reward, no tribute, nothing. And the king said, who is in the court? Now Haman was come into the outer court of the king's house to speak unto the king to hang Mordecai on the gallows that he had prepared for him. So Haman is making a special trip because he feels he has favor, which he does with the king. They ask him just a small favor to hang Mordecai real quick, because it's a thorn in his flesh. Every time he sees him, it upsets him. So let's kill this Mordecai, this Jew that's obstinate and retractable, stubborn, refuses to give me homage. Let me hang him on this 70-foot scaffold I built for him. So he's on his way to see the king. And the king said, what honor and dignity have been done to Mordecai for this? Then as the service was ministering him, there was nothing done for him. And the king said, this is verse 4, the king said, who is in the court? Now Haman was coming to the court. Now Haman was coming to the outer of the court of the king's house to speak unto the king, to hang Mordecai on the gallows that he had prepared for him. And the king's servant said unto him, behold, Haman standeth in the court. And the king said, let him come in. So Haman came in, and the king said unto him, what shall be done unto the man whom the king delighteth to honor? Now Haman's thinking in his bloated, egotistical mind that this is referring to him. So Haman came in, and the king said unto him, what shall be done unto the man whom the king delighted to honor? Now Haman thought in his heart, to whom would the king delight to do more honor, more than myself? Most egotistical people only see themselves. They only self-centered. He's no different. And Haman answered the king, for the man whom the king delighted to honor, let the royal apparel be brought out, which the king uses to wear. So get some of the king's garb, some of the king's robes, and that we can start there. So let us wear some of the royal king's clothes. We'll start right there, which he uses to wear, and the horse that the king rideth on. Oh, well, you get the horse. I mean, shoot, you get very close to the king. The king's clothes, king's horse. You get the king's crown, you're pretty much king. He said, and the horse that the king rideth on, and the crown royal, which is set upon his head. Let me pretend to be king for one day. And let his apparel and horse be delivered to the hand of one of the king's most noble princes, the king's right-hand man. They give a signature of authority here. That they may array the man withal whom the king delighted to honor, and bring him on horseback throughout the street of the city, and proclaim before him. So have this honorable man, hear ye, hear ye. Here comes the honorable Haman. Talk about a royal knighting. This is a serious knighting here. He's knighted. Then the king said to Haman, verse 10, Esther chapter 6, verse 10. Then the king said to Haman, make haste, and take the apparel and the horse, as thou hast said, and even so do to Mordecai the Jew. He wouldn't expect it now. That's a curveball. See, the Bible's an exciting book. Plenty of stories in here. It's sad that men have made to avoid the Word of God by their tradition is bland and boring. But, you know, you can put flesh and blood and bring the Word of God to life like God intended it. It's what we do here at Street Priest Ministry. Human nature hasn't changed. I mean, the Bible said there's nothing new under the sun. Then the king said to Haman, make haste, and take the apparel and the horse, as thou hast said, and do even so to Mordecai the Jew. Now you be the proclaimer, Haman. You're going to be the guy that's saying, hear ye, hear ye. Here's Haman. Exalted of the king. Here's Haman. Even so, I can't help but to read this over and over. Even so do the Mordecai the Jew. The Bible says he that diggeth the pit shall fall therein. His own pit that he's done. See a good example here. That sitteth at the king's gate, let nothing fail of all that thou hast spoken. In other words, you dot your I's and cross your T's. Everything I said, Haman, you better do. Then took Haman, verse 11, then took Haman the apparel and the horse and arrayed Mordecai. See how good God is? Made his enemy dress him. And he's going to be heralding his name as he go in front of him. And Mordecai on the king's horse. See how God exalts his own? Despite what the enemy's doing to try to drag you down, when you God's anointed, how your wicked plan fails. Take God's anointed down. And Mordecai came to the king's gate, but Haman hasted in his house mourning, having his head covered. And Haman told Zereth, his wife, crybaby, and all his friends everything that had befallen him. See how wicked men cry like babies when they lose? They're really weak, these bullies. Bullies are coward in reverse. Really weak. Haman was a bully. He wanted to kill all the Jews. And Haman told Zeresh, his wife, and all his friends everything that had befallen him. Then said his wise men and Zeresh his wife unto him, if Mordecai be of the seed of the Jews, before whom thou hast begun to fall, thus shalt they prevail against him. But shall surely befall him. He said, now that he's gotten power, it's my neck on the line here. I'm going to be home. And while they were yet talking with him, came the king's chamberlains and hasted to bring Haman up unto the banquet that Esther had prepared. So the king and Haman came to the banquet with Esther the queen. And the king said unto Esther on the second day at the banquet of wine, I like this king because he likes wine. I like wine too. He always got a cup of wine in his hand. What is thy petition, Queen Esther? And it shall be granted unto thee. Even what is thy request? And it shall be performed. And it shall be performed. Even to the half of the kingdom. He said, I'll split the kingdom with you. Now remember, his kingdom is vast, from India to Ethiopia. 127 provinces, very rich. Half. I was just thinking of a joke by a famous comedian. I want half. Okay, anyway. Then Esther the queen answered and said, if I have found favor in thy sight, O king, and if it please the king, let my life be given me at my petition, and my people at thy request. Now, she's going to tell the king, I'm Jewish. The king didn't know. For we are sold, and my people, to be destroyed, to be slain, and to perish. Excuse me. But if we had been sold for bondsmen, if we'd been sold for slaves, for slave men and slave women, I would have held my tongue. She said I wouldn't have said that if it was about slavery, because we still have been alive. But this guy wants to exterminate us. Although the enemy could not countervail the king's damage. Then the king Ahasuerus answered and said unto Esther, the queen, who is he wherein that thou dost presume in his heart to do so? And Esther said, the adversary and the enemy is this wicked Haman. Can you imagine Haman standing here, not knowing the queen is Jewish? See how God has a good sense of humor in his book? He had no idea she was Jewish. He knows he's in hot boiling oil now. And Esther said, the adversary, the enemy, is the wicked Haman. Then Haman was afraid before the king and the queen. I think he was like a mouse at a cat convention. And the king, arising from the banquet of wine in his wrath, went into the palace garden. And Haman stood up to make a request for his life to Esther the queen. Now it's time to beg for his life. For he saw that there was evil determined against him by the king. King was so mad, this king got a temper too, by the way. Then the king returned out of the palace garden. He had to go for a stroll to cool down before he spoke. He wanted to grab Haman by his throat. Then the king returned out of the palace garden. He went for a stroll. Now he came back unto the palace of the banquet of wine. And Haman was falling up on the bed wherein Esther was. So Haman's up on the queen's bed begging for his life. Oh man, this is funny. Then the king said, are you going to rape the queen right before me? He said, yo, you going to force the queen. You mean you going to take something from my queen while I'm standing right here? I'm sorry. Think I can visualize this. I'm sorry. He's all up on top of the bed, begging the queen, holding on to the queen, begging for his life, and it just didn't look good to the king. Then said the king, will he force the queen also before me in the house? In my house? You gonna try to oh, you gonna force yourself on the queen in my house? Really? You gonna assault the queen in my house? As the word went out of the king's mouth, because that's all the bystanders standing, all the king's men, all they got to do is see the king pissed, and just him hinting that you did something wrong. You know, that was your ass. The king matter of fact, the king could give a nod and your head go get chopped off right there in front of him. I mean, the king had absolute power over life and death. He wasn't even supposed to come into the king's presence when he had his scepter. If he didn't take his scepter, he was holding it. If he didn't tilt it a certain way to the right, you know, and to grant you to come, or to tilt it forward to grant you to come, you know. But if he tilted it to the right or to the left, depending on which way, you could either be in prison or you could have your head chopped off or hung or whatever. So you had to be careful with pissing the king off with his men standing around. And this king's gangster here. He's a gangster king. And the king... And let me see, where was that? And Haman, one of the king's chamberlains, said before the king, behold, also the gallows are 50 feet high. In other words, we already got something for Haman. He had built these gallows, 70 feet, king. He built them for Mordecai. But the king's right-hand man's letting him know, we already got something special if you want to do it, to make an example of this guy. We got a 70-foot gallows, which Haman had made for Mordecai, who had spoken good for the king standing in the house of Haman. Then the king said, hang him thereon. See, his own wicked device he got hung on. The Bible says that all throughout the Bible. Man devises his wickedness to get hung by his own wicked device that he had built or engineered. It's like you study history. The guy that built the guillotine got his head chopped off by the guillotine. You can go on and on. I think the guy that built the Iron Maiden during the Inquisition for torturing the Christians, he got killed by the Iron Maiden. I mean, you can go on and on and on. So he got hung on his own wicked device that he devised against Mordecai the Jew. So they hanged Haman on the gallows that he had prepared for Mordecai. Then the king's wrath was pacified. That calmed the king down, just hanging him. Felt a little better. Okay, so now what went on? The king, once the king make an edict, it's law. So he already said the Jews had to die. So what he did, he had to make a counter edict to say, okay, before the edict was to be carried out on a certain day, the Jews, he's going to give them a day to rise up and take swords and fight all those that will potentially kill him, to give him a chance to survive and to kill their enemies. And that's what they did throughout all the provinces. And out of that day, because Haman had the word pur is the dice. He had cast lots. It means to cast lots, pur. So the Feast of Purim came out of that. That's one of the most joyous feasts in the Hebrew calendar. It's the 14th month of Adar, which is equivalent to February 28th in our calendar through March 1st. It's called the Feast of Lights, or candles are lit, celebrating religious freedom from tyranny. You're always going to have in history those that want to kill you for your religious beliefs. That's going on with Christians right now around the world. China and Middle East. You can't even carry a Bible without being killed. In the United States, we have what's called the Constitution. What's left of it was the evil Kabbalists that's here in the United States have been trying to shred it to pieces over the years. And the New Age villains of today with their diabolical agendas trying to do